Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the planning meeting. A special one for the one application tonight. We have one next week, if you remember. So if I can just go through some notes. I've been given copious quantities of notes tonight, so I don't just ad-lib everything. Welcome to the public in the gallery and those that are in the spaces around us watching television. I shall now outline the programme of the meeting, and it starts with the routine items of our committee on page 1 of the agenda. We'll go through those first. After we've done that and signed the minutes and everything, then Officer, I promoted him then, Officer Bradshaw will take us through the application from the planning point of view. I will then turn to the public speakers, which seems to have grown to 9. That is applicants, objectors and the councils and the ward member. That's what will happen at that stage. After that, Councillor Wathen will open the debate as a Raunds councillor, and when the councillors have had a chance to debate the application, we will then return to Councillor Wathen for a proposal. Before we start, could I just do one or two usual housekeeping things? Firstly, the whole meeting is being recorded, audio and visual, on a camera up there, so we have a record of everything that is done. We have to have that because we are a quasi-judicial committee, so we can be sorted out afterwards if we get it wrong, as we all know. Also, there's no fire drill tonight. If the alarm goes, then the stewards, all those in the high vises, we've got one left, will tell us all where to go in the car parks. We also have the BBC here tonight. No ITV. Residents in the gallery, and this is the most important point, are asked please to respect the importance of this meeting and allow the councillors to hear everything that is said. We're making a decision, and what we have in front of us on the floor here, we have officers along here, apart from Jill and I who are members. These are members of ENC, all elected, and we're making the decision based upon the papers tonight. So it's essential there's no interruptions. I know emotionally you guys might like to do it, and we do occasionally get that. However, if there are 2 occasions where you don't heed my suggestions, I will close the meeting. The plan is to end at 9 o'clock, but we'll keep going as long as it takes. We've got this special meeting just for your application. And if at 9 o'clock we still need more time, then we will move a proposal to extend beyond 9 o'clock, if that's what members wish. That's my list of notes, so shall we get on with it now? Could I have apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Received apologies from Councillor Richard Gell.
And the minutes of the last meeting, is it your wish, this is dated the 8th of March, is it your wish I sign them? Any complications in it? No. Then that is what I will do. Thank you. Declarations of interest. I remind you all you've had a note from the monitoring officer about predetermination of applications like this. Please bear that in mind. So, declarations of interest then. Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd just like to notify that I am on the planning committee at Raunds Town Council, but as I state there, as I do here, that I will determine this application based on the information that I receive here in this room. Also, the monitoring officer is well
Yes.
aware of that. And also that I do know the landowner, because one of the landowners is a parish councillor at Hargrave, and that is my ward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hughes.
I do know some of the speakers, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of you know some of the speakers, but it's up to you to decide whether there's an interest there for you in knowing them.
There's no peculiar interest, but I do know some of the speakers.
Fine. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. I also know some of people in the public gallery, but that is only an other interest.
Okay, thank you. Are you going to say the same, Councillor Howell?
Yes.
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 And you guys, you know people, and Councillor Mercer. So you've got a note of all those. Those don't preclude you. Councillor Shaplock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that one of the applicants, Henry H. Bledsoes, is known to me.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Lance, sorry.
That's okay. I know the speakers that others know, I guess. I would also advise the meeting that I've spoken to David Rangley on the phone on 3 occasions, and that I've met with Rob Fennick of Howdens on 3 separate occasions. I know the site well and walk and cycle around that site often. On the 5th of December 2016, the invitation of East Northamptonshire District Council Chief Exec, along with 3 district councillors for Raunds wards, were invited to meet with executives of Wroxhill, Howdens and Redbourne, including Mr Fennick. We were asked how better Wroxhill and Howdens could foster local support. We said there was nothing contentious about their business proposals, just their site. They didn't want to talk about the site, they wanted advice about communicating with the local folk, and we suggested that they meet and deal with advertisements in the usual way.
But you're happy you've not predetermined the report?
No, but I would like that information out there for the record to demonstrate how well it is known.
Is that the same for you, Councillor Watson?
It is, except I express no opinion of that meeting.
Okay. You're allowed to do that. Site visits. Councillor Jenny.
I took an unofficial site visit on Sunday afternoon just to get an idea of the area, and
Okay.
I walked round Meadow Lane.
Fine. That's okay. Councillor Hughes?
I walked Meadow Lane on a number of occasions.
Thank you.
Council's site visit yesterday.
Say again.
Council's site visit yesterday.
Just declare it.
No, we did an official one.
I'm told that we have to declare that we went on a site visit yesterday, but I thought that was official business, but no, we're declaring it. So that involves Councillor Howell, 2 Councillor Mercers, Councillor Watson, myself, and you don't count.
I accompanied you, Chair.
You organised it. Okay. Do we have any questions under item 4, please? Thank you. Item 5, Section 106 agreements. Officer Bradshaw.
Thank you, Chair. One request for an extension, and that's to the last item on the list, the variation at Darsdale, and that's until the end of April. There's some delays with the drafting. Thank you.
All the others are going through as you would expect, because we seem to have seen them a number of times.
They are, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6, delegate... Sorry.
The extension. You ought to vote on it.
Okay.
I propose that we accept.
Can you
that
propose it
request.
then, please? Can someone second it? As per the paper, an extension to that particular aspect. Those in favour? Carried. Happy? Right. Item 6, delegations to Head of Planning Services. Who is the gentleman on my right? Rees?
Thank you, Chair. Just one update on the situation at Rushden Lakes. The revised conditions have been circulated, they have all been agreed, and they're ready to refer to the Secretary of State, but we are just resolving the small matter of parking provision. Once that is resolved, the pack will be sent to the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you. All happy? vote for it. Thank you. Carried. So we're on to the application for tonight. As I said, we will start with Officer Bradshaw taking us through the report, which is comprehensive. Thank you very much, officers. And then we'll go on to speakers after that.
Thank you, Chair. This scene setting is necessarily detailed, so please bear with me. This application has been made by Wroxhill for further development at Warth Park. Warth Park is located to the north, west of Raunds, and adjoins the A45 and London Road. The application site forms part of the area directly to the south of Meadow Lane. Wroxhill has been responsible for the development at Phase 2 of Warth Park since 2010, and the scheme is now recognised as an important employment site of sub-regional importance. A 61,665 square metre B8 distribution facility for Howden's Joinery was completed in June last year. This, together with other developments at Warth Park, has created approximately 750 jobs. Construction of a new supermarket for Asda is almost complete on a mixed-use gateway development at the entrance to the site on London Road. The proposed development site covers an area of approximately 29.8 hectares. To the north, the site boundary is largely defined by the established Meadow Lane, which travels from London Road in the east down to Stanwick Lakes in the west, beyond the A45 by underpass. To the east, the site is bounded by an existing hedgerow and landscape bund, whilst to the south and west the boundary is defined by the existing Hog's Dyke. The upper Nen gravel pits, Triple SI, and the special protection area is situated some 200 metres to the northwest of the site on the opposite side of the A45. The application before you tonight proposes two employment buildings marked as 6A and 6B on the slide before you. The buildings will primarily be for storage and distribution with ancillary office accommodation, but will also contain B1 office space and B1B research and development accommodation. The two buildings will provide a combined total of 93,341 square metres of floor space with associated car parking and service yards. The buildings represent an extension to Warth Park and are known here as Phase 3. The buildings will be occupied by Howdens, with Unit 6A providing 64,681 square metres of floor space and Unit 6B providing 28,660 square metres. Vehicular access from Warth Park Way and London Road will be provided via a site access road passing beneath Meadow Lane in the form of an underpass, with Meadow Lane retained at its existing level and alignment. The application also proposes improvements to Meadow Lane, which will provide a broad, extended landscape corridor 60 metres wide, with significant new planting and landscaping along the existing route. The lane itself will remain at its current width. The maintenance of this additional landscaping and the addition to the country park will be secured by legal agreement. There will be no vehicular access to the site from Meadow Lane unless in an emergency. The proposed buildings would be set at a significantly lower level to that of the existing Howdens building as a result of the natural topography and proposed ground remodelling. And on this slide I've taken a line across the ridge of the proposed building to show a comparison with the existing Howdens building. The proposed being on your right and the existing on your left. The development also proposes earthworks and landscaping within the development site, including the creation of drainage features and an additional 13.5 hectares of country park. There are no trees on the site that are protected by a tree preservation order. The site is not within or adjacent to a conservation area, and there are no listed buildings that would materially be affected by the proposals. The site lies mainly within flood zone 1. In terms of further detail, the scheme proposes an initial 600 parking spaces with a further 147 to be provided by a single-storey deck. Unit 6A will provide 62 loading docks for HGVs and an additional 132 spaces should the docks be in use. 6B will provide 26 loading docks and 38 HGV bays. The site has been specifically designed to ensure that it contains sufficient HGV parking to prevent any need for HGVs to wait off-site on Warth Park or in nearby streets. HGVs will be able to enter the site on arrival, greatly reducing the likelihood of noise or air pollution from waiting HGVs and removing the risk of parking nuisance elsewhere in the town. An additional condition has been added to the update sheet to require a revised signage scheme to be submitted and implemented prior to the first use of Building 6A to ensure HGVs do not bypass Warth Park and progress along London Road. The current signage is inadequate and this needs to be remedied. In response to issues with satellite navigation problems, Wroxhill has worked directly with Garmin and TomTom. Those companies have conceded there were mistakes in their base mapping, which has led to drivers to access Meadow Lane in trying to get to Warth Park. As a result of Wroxhill's approach, these companies are now correcting their base mapping, which should help reduce these mistakes by visiting HGVs. Howdens themselves have updated in-cab information for all its own HGV drivers and suppliers, making them aware of the access route into Warth Park to ensure they avoid the town. Howdens have committed to routing all of their HGVs to and from the site via the A45 and not through the Rawns. Howdens have provided a more detailed picture of job creation at the site and its wider campus, and this is included in the update sheet. Howdens expect 500 to 600 jobs to be deployed at the Rawns campus when fully developed, and a further 100 required at peak times. Approximately 300 people currently work at the Howdens Bracknell site in Northampton, and it is anticipated that about 250 will relocate to Rawns. However, this is not confirmed, it could be fewer. As a guide, between 250 and 350 new jobs are expected in Rawns, plus the 100 seasonal jobs. The application includes 120,000 square feet of office accommodation. This space will accommodate a range of functions and activities, including research and design studio space and workshops, as well as more traditional office functions. I'm going to move on now to the principle of the development. Paragraphs 7.14 to 7.35 of the report consider the principle of the development in detail. In summary, both the NPPF and North Northampton's Joint Core Spatial Strategy are supportive of the principle of this type of development in this location. There is conflict with the Rawns Neighbourhood Plan in this regard, with Policy R6 allocating the site as protected open space. The Officer view on this matter is covered in paragraphs 7.28, 7.31 and 7.32. And in short, that is that reduced weight should be given to Policy R6 given the status of the plan and objections to the specific policy. Notwithstanding the Officer view, legal advice has been sought from King's Chambers in Birmingham, and I ask you to give it serious consideration. It is on the update sheet, but I'm going to summarise it here. The advice states, the draft Neighbourhood Plan Policy R6 purports to allocate the site of the development and additional land to the east, together referred to as Site 25 in the Neighbourhood Plan, as protected open space. The land at Site 25 is private land, privately owned and in farming use. It is not, and never has been, public open space, and there is very little public access to it currently. The Wroxhill objection to Policy R6 points out that the term protected open space appears to be a term coined in the draft Neighbourhood Plan that does not appear or appear defined elsewhere. The Neighbourhood Plan is effectively allocating new public open space outside the terms of the development plan and without any identifiable authority or basis for doing so. The landowners do not agree to such an allocation of their land. The authors of the Neighbourhood Plan are unable to force them to do so. The proposal is therefore undeliverable and entirely aspirational. It is axiomatic, in my view, that's the barrister, that the Neighbourhood Plan cannot achieve this aspiration. I agree in short with the objection on behalf of Wroxhill. The unilateral sequestering by the Neighbourhood Plan of private land is not something which can carry weight in policy terms. In my view, this is very unlikely to be approved by the Neighbourhood Plan Inspector when it comes to be examined. read anything into any case law as supporting the approach that the Warns Neighbourhood Plan is taking, namely the unilateral allocation of the Warth Park site, Site 25, as protected open space. Neither is there anything in the case law that would support any significant weight to be given to a neighbourhood plan at such an early stage as this one. This neighbourhood plan is yet to be examined. There is significant objection to it, which, on face value, would carry significant weight in itself, and attacks the plan as unsound and undeliverable on this point regarding policy R6 alone. At this stage, my judgment is that the objection will likely to be upheld and the neighbourhood plan will have to be changed, at least in this respect. Policy R6 therefore should not be given significant weight, or in my view, any weight at this stage. The draft officer's report, now final of course, has prepared 2 sentences relating to this issue. I can confirm that I have considered them carefully and agree with them. I would suggest, however, that the comment that the Warns Neighbourhood Plan, having been submitted, is at an advanced stage of preparation and greater weight can be attached to it, may be somewhat generous and going too far. It has progressed in the stages of preparation and therefore more weight should be attached to it generally, but in respect of policy R6 particularly, I do not think that weight can be attached for the reasons given above. That is effectively reflected in the comments in the draft report sentence that it is highly likely that the area of land marked as protected under policy R6 affected by the proposed development will not be included in the final adopted document. That's the Warns Neighbourhood Plan. These sentences are, with that possible amendment as to the weight overall, a suitable way of setting out the issues in the report for members. To the visual impact. The Council has engaged the services of an independent landscape consultant to assess the proposals. A summary of his findings is detailed on the update sheet and the full version is on the website. He concludes that the scheme will give rise to significant adverse landscape and visual effects and will, as a consequence, bring about substantial landscape and visual change to the application site and the immediate locality. The extent and nature of those adverse effects in the context of the location of the site adjacent to the existing development Warth Park Phase 2 and proposed mitigation measures are not, however, of such overall significance that they should weigh unduly in the planning balance. Taking into account the intended mitigation measures, both primary and secondary, the proposed development would not be in conflict with any policy in the development plan or be in conflict with any provision of the National Planning Policy Framework. Planning permission should therefore be granted subject to appropriate conditions. On the issue of noise generation at both the construction and operational stages has been carefully considered by the Council's Senior Environmental Protection Officer following the submission of a noise and vibration assessment report. This assessment is based upon a worst case scenario of 24/7 operation. Paragraph 7.43 of the officer's report incorrectly states that Howdens does not presently operate during the night or at weekends. Howdens currently operate during these times according to demand and require absolute operational flexibility that a 24/7 permission provides at this site. The planning application has been submitted and assessed on the basis of a 24/7 operation and the mitigation strategy reflects this. The application proposes the erection of an acoustic fence, which is significantly over and above that required by the assessment. The Council's Senior Environmental Protection Officer has no objections to the application on the grounds of noise. Officers have reviewed the planning history for Warth Park, and one building does have an hours of operation restriction attached to it, and this condition in question restricts the loading and unloading and requires further assessment if the operator wishes to operate outside those stated hours on that condition. As the application before committee tonight has been assessed on a 24/7 basis, it is your officer's view that to impose a restriction on hours of operation would be unreasonable and therefore fail to meet the tests in paragraph 206 of the NPPF. In all other respects, the design, air quality impacts on rights of way, archaeology, highway safety and residential amenity, the application is considered acceptable, subject to the conditions in the report and those adjusted and added to on the update sheet, and subject to a 106 agreement to secure the following. £100,000 towards the Construction Futures Programme as per earlier phases of Warth Park, securing works required to upgrade Meadow Lane and its future maintenance, provision of the Country Park and its future maintenance, and securing works to upgrade the two nearest bus stops on Marshalls Road with bus shelters, widened footway, waiting area and raised curbs. I recommend that this application be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rhys. Very comprehensive. Before we start with the speakers, two other things is that when the speakers are speaking, which is going to be now, could you turn towards them? We've got a strange angle with the thing being there, but you can't see them or listen to them without turning in your seats, perhaps. And can we also make sure that the microphones are somewhere near our mouths so that those of us who are going deaf can actually hear everything? Thank you. So we'll start with the first speaker, which is Councillor Glanville Greenwood Smith, who is one of the two ward members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Much has been said and written, and I offer my observations now as ward councillor. Any development will present a mixture of positive and negative elements. After looking carefully at the published material and comments, the main objections appear to be centred around noise, lighting, 24/7 operation, and especially location. There are particularly the perceived effects on Meadow Lane. As one who has campaigned extensively for Meadow Lane to be available all year round as a safe pedestrian and cycle route to Stanwick Lakes, I welcome the intensive landscaping and drainage to the surrounding area and improvements to the surface of the track. On the subject of noise and lighting, to the proximity of dwellings to the development seems to be compliant with the relevant regulations, and the separation distance between the new development and these properties is far greater than that which already exists between parts of Warth Park 2 and properties in and around the London Road. However, expert guidance is available to you as councillors. Whilst it's my understanding that 24/7 working is planned only on an occasional basis, a business of this type must have flexibility to work extended hours, and it would be completely impractical and unique to this business on Warth Park, the update sheet refers. The location of the proposed development is far from ideal, but it presents a practical solution to a business needing to locate its headquarters on one site. The letter from TPS commissioned by the Town Council states the proposed development conflicts with the neighbourhood plan. Again, the update sheet refers, and you've heard the comments from the barrister on that one. I did struggle to find any evidence base for the many opinions given by TPS. Their assertion that the proposed application does not have the support of the local community must be a bit of an exaggeration, given they based this on a survey where only 124 ballots were returned. It is much more impressive that subsequently over 500 people from Raunds and Stanwick signed a petition opposing the development. However, this represents around only 5% of the population of the two communities. It is, of course, the duty of the Planning Committee to determine what is in the best interests of the community as a whole. The proposal does seem to be in general compliance with NPPF regulations, as the committee report shows. However, the genuine concerns about lighting and noise seem to have been fully explored, and the proposed development does seem compliant. Again, you have the power to investigate this fully in your deliberations tonight. Raunds has undergone massive changes in housing development, with over 1,000 new dwellings planned in the years to come. The development at Warth Park will help restore the balance between housing and jobs, not in one day, but over the course of years to come. The application before you tonight will provide an additional number of jobs for opportunities in Raunds, and Helens will be bringing some employees with them, some of whom will decide to relocate, becoming local residents and using facilities. Helens are the 142nd largest company in the FTSE All Share Index, and in my opinion we should welcome investment in our town by such a large organisation. I fully understand that residents have concerns, and I do believe that at the time will prove them that they will prove to be concerns no longer. I believe on the balance of probability lies in favour of granting this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. The second speaker is Councillor Sylvia Hughes, who's speaking on behalf of Raunds Town Council.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here tonight representing the other 11 Raunds Town Councillors, the 130 people or so that I have behind me in the gallery tonight and across the gallery, and the 10,000 people of Raunds who stood behind them. And let's not forget that when asked for their opinions, over 97% of those who responded and the 500 households who signed the petition presented by our MP Tom Pursglove in Parliament said they were against this development. Warth Town Council has been working on the neighbourhood plan for 3 years, so not a short space of time, as suggested. After the first consultation, Wroxall's response was to advise that they had plans to develop one of the pieces of land that had been earmarked as the plan as a protected open space. We took particular care to ensure that comments and amendments suggested by ENC planning policy officers were carefully considered. No suggestion was made through ENC that the designation of protected open space at Meadow Lane should not be included in the plan. Even then, we undertook further targeted consultation and the results were overwhelming. The survey went to every household. 94% of residents agreed the area should be kept as a local green space. The council had clear evidence as to why the area was being protected in the plan. We submitted the plan to ENC last November, who carried out a consultation of their own which was completed in January 2017. What should have happened is that alongside the consultation is the ENC should have put forward a potential examiner, but nothing has happened. So it's surprising the officer's report in front of you this evening suggests that this is highly unlikely, as this piece of land would be included in the final adopted plan. And why the delay? There is a clear directive in the planning regulations, and in the case of other neighbourhood plans submitted to the ENC, the examiner's report was completed 1 month after the consultation ended. In the case of Raunds, 8 weeks after the consultation, and still no examiner has been appointed. I see from the update sheets that you've been seeing the barrister's opinion. Well, I think this is premature, as the initial response from the ENC was to accept the plan and put it forward. It's only subsequently from Wroxall's application that ENC seem to have changed their mind, and it's unfortunate that this has not been to the inspector in a timely manner. So if the neighbourhood plan had been processed and approved, this development would be contrary to the Raunds neighbourhood plan, and we would not be faced with this devastating application. It's the responsibility of the district and town councils to protect our environment, and that's why we are putting in place neighbourhood plans. From the 1st of October 2016, a government bill made it the responsibility of local authorities to support parishes to deliver local plans. The Joint Core Strategy Policy 24 states that this size of warehouse should also include smaller employment units, as pointed out. But this proposed development contravenes it. Well, I must just say then that the 106 agreements are flimsy and not acceptable to the town council. We don't want money for their we don't want the Meadow Lane changing. We want to know what is happening.
The third speaker, on behalf of Stanwick Parish Council, is Councillor Dave Mundy.
Right, I'm Dave Mundy, I represent Stanwick Parish Council, and I will highlight the following points. The development is contrary to Stanwick's emerging neighbourhood plan that seeks to retain a strategic gap between Stanwick and other settlements. This development will urbanise the rural landscape and remove the rural corridor between Raunds and Stanwick. The loading and parking bays will be on the Stanwick side of the development, and documents indicate that a significant number of vehicle movements will be outside of social hours. The documents suggest that the traffic noise at receptor R4, Mallows Grange, will not change, and that R5, Needham Road, will have a negligible increase. I question these results and would point out that R5, which will have a noise increase, is twice R4's distance from the development. Even if the development is fully compliant with the dark sky lighting policies, the topography of the development will allow light that is emitted below the horizontal to be seen from various parts of Stanwick. This will not be stopped by the barrier. This will ruin evening and nighttime views for residents and cause light nuisance. We also note that valleys often have a strong funneling effect that increases the wind speed along the axis of the valley. Wind speeds increase as the wind goes around an obstruction, such as this development, causing eddies and vortices. These can be strong enough to harm people and damage property. If I paraphrase Hamlet, it's Stanwick that that must suffer the noise and nuisance of this outrageous development and accept the visual blight of a Trump-style wall against a sea of objections. But by opposing, we end them. I recommend that this committee refuse this application as the potential harm that the development will cause to residents' well-being and the rural landscape will far outweigh any benefits that might be gained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The third speaker is an objector, Anne Dagan.
Thank you. You are asked to approve more than the two vast tin sheds described in the report before you. They require a massive earthwork platform covering 29.8 hectares, which would obliterate half the valley and turn the remaining half into a wind funneling canyon. The area of the tin boxes would be 93,341 square metres. Howden's financiers explicitly classify these sheds as big boxes, which clearly demonstrates their lack of aesthetic merit, particularly in a rural setting. The Planning Inspectorate recently rejected a mere 50,000 square metre depot in a less rural area on the edge of Northampton because the result would be to significantly erode the rural characteristic of the site. This proposal would cover 298,000 square metres. The report before you fails to consider the height of the proposed structure. Earthworks and tin boxes have a combined height of 120 feet, in a valley which, at its deepest, is only 86 feet. It would entirely destroy the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. Analysis of the original proposal dimensions shows that they would barely fit the space available. The contaminated land report mentions the risk of catastrophic collapse of the earthworks and recommends that the angling of the earthworks be lessened. This would require more space. As described, the development would not fit. Approval of the tin sheds would inevitably result in any landscaping being reduced to the point of ineffectiveness to make them fit. The NPPF requires applicants to work closely with those affected by the proposal. The applicant has ignored the fact that a large residential area of Stanwick would be adversely affected by noise, light and air pollution. Consultation has been entirely lacking and no mitigation is proposed for this industrial nuisance. The report before you fails to bring that to your attention. Developers have a duty of care within the Health and Safety Act to address and consult on major foreseeable risks. This area is known by insurers to experience winds in excess of 120 miles an hour, resulting in major property damage and risk to life. There is a century of data on the effect of large-scale structures on wind patterns. The proposal and the report before you fail to address this despite it being highlighted in planning objections. The application contains a range of other serious flaws, including double counting and overstatement of the jobs to be created by such a highly automated warehouse. Traffic figures inconsistent with the intended usage of the site. And a noise report which fails to conform to any requirements.
3 minutes are allowed and they're up.
Right. I am therefore asking that
leave the dais, please.
That you reject this.
And the next speaker is another objector, June Longhurst.
Good evening. My name is June Longhurst. I have a small holding the other side of the Hogs Dyke, the nearest neighbour to this proposed development. Northants County Council state Meadow Lane is a bridleway only. It is an offence to ride a motorcycle or drive a motor vehicle without lawful authority under Section 34 of the Road Traffic Act of 1988. First documented in an Anglo-Saxon charter of 970, Meadow Lane was gifted to the people of Raunds, not to be claimed by individuals. I believe these proposals to be unlawful by attempting to open the restricted bridleway to other traffic.
I further believe that the proposals discriminate against horse owners and riders, as not one provision has been made to ensure the safety of horse and rider. Horses legally have primary right of passage on a bridleway. In the UK, air pollution is directly responsible for 28,000 deaths annually in the over 25 age group. East Northamptonshire already has a rating of 9.7. This is a par with Leeds, Sheffield and St Helens. It's reckless and foolhardy to subject the public to this magnitude of slow-moving trucks in an area surrounded by footpaths and bridleways. This displays no duty of care whatsoever. The siting of the shed, tens of metres away from my boundary of Hogsdyke on a 20-metre high plinth, making a total height of 38.360 metres above my land, will result in my property suffering from artificial light during the natural dark hours. This will deprive me of my livelihood, as my flock requires circadian rhythm in order to breed. This development is not about jobs, it's about relocation and centralisation. There are no new jobs. The current workforce will have to retire, leave or die before there are any more jobs. This development is about the destruction of our heritage and to satisfy the greed and avarice of a few to the detriment of many. I urge you to say no.
I'll start briefly with the number of HGV movements that will entail should Warth Park 3 be approved. According to Appendix 9.1 of the application, there will be 793 movements a day, 53% of these outside of normal working hours, and 30% over 200 movements during the hours 11 p.m. to 7 a.m, reversing alarms, engines revving, shutters slamming all through the night. In addition, the plans allow for 600 plus car parking spaces. Even being economical, this will mean that we will see 1,500 to 2,000 vehicle movements a day with associated air and noise pollutions. I could also go on about the annihilation of the countryside or the destruction of an ancient henge, many more issues. However, my central point is that I have read the planning officer's report and recommendation of acceptance, and it appears that the main and, dare I say, only valid argument in favour is the creation of jobs and associated economic growth. Indeed, there is a continual theme running through the report that in response to all areas of concern, such as air, noise, light pollution, traffic numbers and the ruination of the countryside, the repeated counter is, quote, although of concern, these are outweighed by the economic growth and creation of 600 jobs. Note, 600 jobs. A new figure has now been plucked out of the air, quoting 350 jobs. At a public consultation last June on 3 separate occasions, and the 3 witnesses, if challenged, are prepared to sign affidavits attesting this, a senior executive of Howden's, in response to a direct question, categorically and unequivocally stated 3 times that there would be no jobs available for the local populace, as Howden's would be bringing in their own current staff to fill these vacancies. We now have serious discrepancies. 600, 350, none. I'll tell you what, it'll be a lot less than the 600 that is the base for the initial recommendation. And to take that face value of our last single statement, it destroys all justification for this development to go ahead. And regardless, convenes the MNJPU JCS on not least item 719, which seeks to provide, quote, a self-reliant economy, one which is not overly dependent on in or out commuting. There are other contraventions in that document, as well as at least a dozen subject items in the NPPF. Finally, on behalf of the Warth Park Opposition Group, on behalf of the 567 signatories of the petition opposing, which our MP has presented to Parliament, on behalf of the hundreds of local residents, your constituents, who will see their quality of life deeply and irreversibly damaged, and on behalf of the next generations who will realise the legacy of tonight's decision, I implore you, please do not give approval to this monstrosity. It is not wanted, it is not needed, it is not justifiable.
Yeah, good evening, Chair. Good evening, Councillors. I'd like to explain why Howdens wants to come to Warth Park. For those that don't know, Howdens started from nothing, absolutely nothing, in 1995. Yes, certainly, Howdens started from nothing in 1995 to what is today a major British success story. Last year we turned over £1.3 billion and we made profit of over £250 million. Not many businesses can say that. We employ 9,000 people from 650 depots and serve 450,000 trade professionals. So Howdens is all about looking to the future. A future because we have prospects, significant prospects. I can say that because in the last 22 years, apart from the financial crisis in 2008, we have grown every one of those 22 years. We're living in changing times, be that technology, customers want more choice, changing economics, so we need to make plans. Strong, robust plans for the future. Infrastructure for our operations, offices for our staff, and the hiring professional staff to lead the place forward. And we want these to be on Warth Park, integrated with our existing site in partnership with you. And we've talked about creating a centre of excellence, and some of the job definitions have been referred to already by the officers. Quality assurance, HR, finance, purchasing, supply chain, research and development, testing, marketing, including apprentices. And it is categorically between 500 to 600 jobs in the long term, and there are no more than 300 people at the existing site. Some, by the way, have already bought houses in Roans as part of the relocation. We're also looking for 6 times the office space in the planning application. If we didn't expect to hire the staff, we wouldn't be putting office space in the planning application. We're a public company. And we're talking about a 30-year lease. And we want the future of our business will be in the hands of the Rowan staff. The future of our business will be in the hands of the Rowan staff. Because 80% of the products we sell will be stored here, managed here, developed here, administered here, improved here. So if Rowans fail, we fail. That's why I know the standard of professional and blue-collar staff will be of the highest order. It has to be. And I want to talk about the community, and I want to quote the Deputy Chief Fire Officer of Humberside. As we worked in the last 10 years, your staff have been involved in saving 6 lives from fires and had a direct and positive impact on another 20 people of these types of accidents. It is no exaggeration to say that the employees of Howdens have had a positive impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We strongly welcome the conclusions and recommendation of the officer's report and the draft planning conditions. I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about one or two important aspects of the application. As is referred to in the committee report, the application allows for 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. This assumption forms the basis of the transport assessment and the noise impact assessment, which form part of the wider environmental impact assessment which underpins the application. By the way, the EIA, the environmental impact assessment, covers a range of topics in detail, including lighting, ground conditions, air quality, lighting, issues discussed tonight and that you've heard a few comments about. They are covered in detail in the EIA. But to come back to the 24-hour issue, the application is based on the worst case assumption of 24 hours, 7-day-a-week. So that means, in addition, the traffic and noise assessments both assume higher levels of traffic than Howdens expects to generate. So the levels of traffic noise assessed are higher than those likely to be seen if approved and if operated, ensuring a robust approach has been taken. The Council's environmental protection officers have thoroughly reviewed the noise assessment, and they also requested and received further more detailed information to help them understand the potential noise impacts. Mitigation measures included to minimise noise include use of narrowband HGV reversing alarms, as well as an acoustic barrier along the southern edge of the yards. This barrier is described by the environmental protection officers as unnecessary, given the low predicted noise impacts, and as providing a belt and braces approach to noise issues. The officers' conclusions were that even based on the worst case assumptions, the impact on local amenity will not be significant. In fact, overall, the assessment identifies no material adverse impacts, with most receptors likely to experience only a negligible change. As a result, no additional noise mitigation measures were required by council officers. No condition to restrict or control hours of operation is considered necessary or appropriate by officers, given the negligible noise impacts expected, even from these worst case assessments. Therefore, members can be reassured, as your officers are, that the local impacts of 24-hour operations have been properly and fully assessed and considered as part of that wider environmental impact assessment. The detailed hours of operation of this building are not yet known or confirmed, and they may well change over time as the business continues to evolve. As you've heard from Mr. Fenwick, Howdens are looking to make a long-term commitment to Rawns and are a successful and growing business. The flexibility to operate on a 24-hour basis is required, and it's critical to this proposal. Without that flexibility, this significant investment in the economy of East Northamptonshire would be at significant risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to take this opportunity to elaborate on what we see as several key issues that relate directly to the planning application and the officer's recommendation to approve. Wroxall have had a presence in Rawns for some time, since the inception of Phase 2 at Warth Park, and we've been responsible for the development of the DPD, Airware, DSV and existing Howdens facilities. You may also be aware that we're currently constructing a supermarket facility for Asda at the front of the site, and I'm pleased to announce that as of last Friday, Asda have confirmed that this store will open on Monday the 24th of April. Alongside these developments, we have delivered a 35-acre country park, which is now beginning to mature, and we're delighted that this facility is being well used by local residents. We have had some very encouraging feedback regarding the country park, and in response to specific comments, we have recently provided a new visitors car park. We are committed to continuing to deliver such measures and facilities that align with local policies and priorities, and this application would deliver an additional 33-acre country park connected to the existing one by a network of new foot and cycle paths. Improvements to Meadow Lane to include a new surface, hedge reinstatement, installation of new picnic areas, and additional planting to provide a wider landscaped corridor, increasing from its current width of 15 metres to a minimum of 60 metres, with over 9,500 new trees and shrubs being planted along its length. The alignment, level and connectivity of Meadow Lane absolutely will not change. We are in the process of finalising the exact detail of Section 106 with the Council, but alongside these works we propose the following: a contribution to deliver an improved underpass under the A45 at the western end of Meadow Lane, contributions to Construction Futures initiatives to enable local training and employment generation, the transfer of a strip of land around the edge of the site to the Town Council or a body that they deem appropriate to underline our commitment to no further development at Warth Park. And we will also work with the Town Council to try and identify an opportunity to bridge the Hogsdyke to enable a link to the Lawrence Amos playing field. Finally, following the issue of visiting HGVs sometimes getting lost on London Road and attempting to access Warth Park via Meadow Lane, we have recently installed new signage on London Road, spoken to the individual companies that are located on site, and approached both Garmin and TomTom UK, who have confirmed there are routing errors on their system. We are now assured by these committees that these have been amended, so we hope that these initiatives will help to alleviate the problems moving forward. But in addition to this, we would welcome meetings with local residents to understand if they have any further suggestions. Thank you.
You really want to hear me, do you? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you, Chairman. Thank you very much. Right, when Warth Park first came to Raunds, it was one that I thought, well, this is good for Raunds. Not dead keen on the idea of sheds, but it's the way of the world at the moment, distribution. So I welcomed it. And to me, Warth Park was always going to be that strip of land above the yellow line we see on the screen there, which is Meadow Lane. That to me was going to be Warth Park. And from a personal point of view, that would be the boundary. Nothing south of that boundary. But that's a personal point of view. And as councillors, we have to judge the application we have in front of us. We've heard various views and opinions, and I'm sure we'll hear more as fellow councillors add their thoughts to this matter. The recommendation is to approve. Now, if we wish to go away from that recommendation, we have to have strong, sustainable planning reasons. And I emphasise that. I mean, my fellow councillors will know that, but I emphasise that to members of the public. If we don't have those strong planning reasons, and they may well come forward in discussion tonight, but if we don't have those, then any decision here could go to appeal, and costs could be awarded against us. In a previous case where we refused something and it went to appeal and won, we had costs of 150,000 or thereabouts awarded against this council. Not only do we have the cost factor, we also lose control of the application and the conditions around it. That they devolve directly to the planning inspector, so we lose a fair degree of control. So let me just emphasise that we have got to have strong reasons, and I understand and concur with an awful lot of what I've heard from the gallery in terms of their disquiet about this application. I'm going to look at one particular aspect of it, and I'm sure other colleagues here will look at other points. And the one I want to concentrate on initially is that of noise. I have to say I'm disappointed looking at the update sheet to see that paragraph 7.43 of the report incorrectly states that Howdens does not presently operate during the night or at weekends. I certainly had got from what I've seen in writing in the report that was the case. In the meeting that I attended with other councillors, where I said actually I expressed no opinion, as I would have to lead on this matter, I felt sure that we had the indication from Howdens that they would not be intending to operate during the night time or at weekends. I may have been wrong in my memory, but that certainly is my memory of that particular one. Vehicle movements. Now, we've looked at a worst case scenario, and I was hoping we wouldn't have to look at a worst case scenario, but obviously the ball game has changed given the comment on the update sheet. I would look at unsocial hours being between midnight and 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. to midnight now. That might be varied by an hour, I'm not sure, but I've based my figures on that. And according to Appendix 9.1, the HGV profile, it states on here, albeit as a worst-case scenario, that between the hours of midnight and 7 a.m., there would be 174 vehicle movements. That equates to 24.8 movements per hour. And between 7 p.m. and midnight, 148 vehicle movements, which equates to 29 per hour. I note in the Wroxhill report, the noise and vibration report, I notice on page 18 of that particular report, they talk about the various noise generated. Reversing alarms, it's stated there that they would create 99 decibels over a 42-second period. I'm no expert at reading these noise reports, I have to emphasise that, and some of these reports I'm sure baffle us with masses of pretty graphs and figures, but these are what I've gleaned from it. The start-up and pull-away operations, if you remember the numbers of movements that I've mentioned, 174 and 148, that's just in the unsocial hours, I'm not talking about daytime now. Start-up and pull-away would be 101 decibels for 42 seconds. Loading and unloading is rated at 91 decibels over a 30-minute period during the day and a 15-minute period during the night. I don't quite understand why it's different. Perhaps you unload quicker at night, I'm not quite sure. But that's what we have in the report. And in those reports there's lots of mention of average sound levels. No mention, or other than the ones I've just mentioned about the reversing alarms, about peak levels. Now, if I'm asleep summertime and the window open because it's a balmy summer's evening, which we do get occasionally in this country, it's the peak levels that are going to disturb me and disturb, I guess, young children as well. So I do have concern about that and would welcome, when I've just gone through this, officer comment on it. I notice that ENC, the council, has also undertook or had completed another supplementary noise report, which was good. And between page 8 and page 11 of that report, it talked about the ambient background noise, the typical noise that goes on day in and day out. And it talked about, in decibel levels, between 36 and 40 decibels at the various receptors. For example, receptor 1 was 37 decibels during the day and also the same at night. Receptor 1 is at the bottom of the red arrow where it says A45, just about there, I guess. I think I'm right in that. Receptor 2, 3 and 4, which come around the bottom of the site, we don't actually see them on there, which are the sort of stanic area. We're talking about daytime ambient background noise between 36 decibels and 38, and at night time being about 36 decibels. I noticed in this report, it actually then, those figures were Wroxhill's figures, by the way. This report corrected some of Wroxhill's figures. and varied it by as much as 19 decibels. Now, that concerns me that we've got one set of experts saying such and such noise levels, another set of experts saying, well, actually it can vary by 19. The difference between 19 refers to the reversing alarm start-up, etc., just to clarify that. Now, it talks about a change of 10 decibels as being significant. I really feel I would welcome officer comment on particularly this noise aspect, because noise is so dependent upon atmospheric conditions. We can do desktop exercises and use the latest software to predict what things are going to be, but we only need to have the wind in the wrong direction and different atmospheric conditions, and particularly at night, sound travels extremely well. I certainly have. In just a moment, yes. I've just finished this little bit, and then I'll allow the officer to comment. Yep, we will indeed. In fact, my point here actually is changed because of the change on the update sheet. So, yeah, I will ask officers' comment.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, the answer won't be very, very long either, because I'm not an expert in noise, as you would appreciate. All I can say about the noise report is that the Senior Environmental Protection Officer, and it's unfortunate that she couldn't be here tonight, she's on annual leave, she did go back to the applicant's noise consultant for some additional information, and I'm guessing that's the report, the secondary report that you've got there. So she wasn't happy with the first set, but she did consider it in great detail, and all I can say is she did conclude that the stats put before her in the first set of information and then the supplementary report she was happy with, and recommended that we accept them, and that's all I can say on that matter.
Thank you very much. I just say that the Roxhill report for reversing alarms, etc., talked about 99, round about the 100 decibel mark, and the report you've just referred to has corrected those and reduced them by 19 decibels. Now that's a significant difference.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that we don't accept these reports on face value, and that's the purpose for the Senior Environmental Protection Officer.
Okay, well, our set is more favourable than Roxhill's set, obviously, it would appear. I'll stop there, actually, Chairman, and
Why?
You go with surprise there. No, I will stop at that particular point. I said I would talk about the noise element. I know colleagues have got other aspects that they wish to raise.
Okay, you can come back if you've got other points, obviously. Anyone got any comments to make? Anyone want to add to the debate? Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, a few comments. On the subject of noise, I'd just point out that noise decreases as a square of the distance from the generator, and as a result, when you go any significant distance, you can have the noise depreciate quite fast, although atmospheric conditions do play a significant role, e.g. when there's a temperature inversion, etc. Having said that, when I went on the site visit, there was activity at the existing site, the existing building, which is higher and more likely to cause noise problems, and as soon as you got more than a few hundred metres from it, the traffic noise from the A45 seemed to completely eclipse it. That's what I'd just comment on that. On the subject of jobs, it's an ambivalent issue, because I do not believe that 600 new jobs or anything like it will be created in this area. A significant number of the workers will either relocate or will commute. However, through time, gradually, those workers will be replaced eventually by local workers, simply because people retire eventually. So in the long term there will be 600 jobs, but it just won't be in the short term. Right now, one interesting aspect is that the NNJCS Policy 24, paragraph A, talks about distribution units of greater than 9,300 square metres. Well, this is about 10 times that size, so it definitely classes. And it says in those cases, the unit should include a proportion of floor space in the form of smaller employment units. Now, this clearly doesn't include smaller employment units, despite what it says in paragraph 730. However, it does include significant areas of office space, which is something that East Northamptonshire is deficient in, and I think it would be churlish and very difficult to justify a requirement for smaller employment units when the office space is being provided and even R&D facilities. If we were to go on that as a reason for refusal, I think we'd be crucified on appeal. Right, also, I'm concerned about the country parks. I've not seen any evidence that the Town Council is actually going to take them over, and there's no management company that I'm aware of being set up to run them. I don't know who's going to run them, and it referred to legal agreements being produced, but no wording for those proposed legal agreements was produced, and it's not clear over what timescale those legal agreements will be in force. For instance, what happens if Roxhill goes into liquidation, is bought out, or merges with another company, etc., etc. It's not clear to me what will happen in those circumstances, and admittedly they've planted, I think, something like 30,000 trees so far, with an expectation of a large number more, but that requires an awful lot of on-site management, and it's not clear, and the conditions don't seem to me particularly strong in requiring a commitment for maintenance of that country park area in perpetuity. So I'm concerned about that. Also, there's a further point, and that is that it was not clear to me that that is effectively becoming public open space. It is open space, but it's not clear that it has a granting to the general public of a right of access and of use of that space, nor does it give any definition of what use of that space the general public have. And to me it would seem that all those issues need to be clarified before we can feel comfortable with this. Having said that, none of those are what I'd consider substantial issues that I'd be prepared to try and defend on an appeal.
Thank you. Following up on Councillor Mercer's point around noise pollution, I'm not clear how the 800 vehicle movements across this 1 million square foot development per day and the 747 car parking spaces can't be seen to affect air quality. Can the officer please explain why there is no detrimental impact on air quality?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll attempt to. The Environmental Protection Officer simply didn't object to it on that basis, so knowing that I was going to be the one presenting it tonight, did chase her up on that. There are receptors along the A45 and to the south of the site, I believe, and they have never been triggered to the European, whatever the European limit is for air pollution. And on that basis, with the predicted growth in HGV movements, she was happy that this wouldn't increase air pollution significantly, so as to trigger those receptors in the future.
So on two very, very important points, the senior environmental protection officer, whose words are spoken through you, not an expert, we are to take your word that she has scientifically no doubts without any evidence of the scientific basis for that. Is that true?
Her original comments were based on evidence, but I wanted a bit more of a background on where the receptors were and what the levels were, and if they've even been triggered in the past. She said they haven't been triggered in the past, and they're significantly below the European limit. I can tell you here what that European limit is, but it's currently significant below, so there's movement there for any growth.
I just think it's a shame, Chairman, that the person who could genuinely answer these questions with conviction isn't at the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few points, actually. I must admit, I was quite shocked that there was no reference to Stanek in the report whatsoever. There's no reference, you can't access their objections or references online at all either. I want to know how much weight has been given to Stanek's neighbourhood plan in this development, because obviously it doesn't mention it anywhere. Thank you.
At the stage that the neighbourhood plan is at, little.
Thank you. It's been submitted, hasn't it?
Yes.
So it's at the same stage as Rawn's?
Yes.
Okay. And it carries little weight?
The same amount as the Rawn's neighbourhood plan.
Which we're struggling to determine.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Also, I note in the report that you have what we call relevant planning history. A page and a bit's worth of relevant planning history, although none of it relates to this site because this is not Warth Park. This happens to be a totally separate piece of land with a bridleway road running that separates the two. So what relevance has this planning history got? What I'm trying to establish is, if it doesn't have any planning history on this land, it doesn't set a precedence. Do you see where I'm coming from? So can you please answer that question? Thank you.
The officer outlined the planning history for the wider Warth Park site because it's of relevance to the scheme, because it's an extension of Warth Park. But yes, there is no planning history on the site below Meadow Lane. You're correct.
Thank you. Although it isn't Warth Park yet. Also,
proposed extension to Warth Park.
But it's true, it isn't. The land to the right, as we look at the picture to the right above it, now that does have planning history on it, doesn't it? That has planning history. It had an application for housing back in 2004, if I'm correct, and that was refused based on noise at an appeal. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. My point on that is that, and it was raised actually by the planning officer when we went on the site visit, which I must say, with only 5 members turning up, we could have done with a bit more notice for the site visit, that we are opening up the floodgates really for that other piece of land to be developed on, because it's already had planning application on it. So that's what I'd like to highlight, that it was stated to me. Yeah, I know, but it could possibly have a bearing if we allow that planning application to go through. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. But it has no relevant planning history on that land.
Not on the application, certainly.
Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Planning is a kind of pick and mix operation, because you pick the bits you want and you ignore the bits you don't. There have been 2 cases in Rawn's recently where we ignored the plans about how many cars we should have outside a house because it wasn't convenient. It suited the applicant to ignore it. We ignored on the housing development Choveston Road when they wanted to split a house into 2.
that the size of the rooms didn't actually conform, we just ignored that. So it is a pick and mix thing, and you can choose the bits you want to prove the point you want. And the same applies to experts. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been on planning committees. I remember some trees when there was an expert who came from the council to say that we should knock the trees down. They're all dead, dying and dangerous. There was another expert, equally expert, all the qualifications, who said they're okay. So we have to take all these things, including the opinion of a barrister, with a pinch it deserves, because after all he was employed by the people who wanted to prove that the neighbourhood plan wasn't right. So there are I have a number of issues also with the application itself, and I'm disappointed about the application in a way. The so-called emergency route, for example, along Meadow Lane, they say they're going to improve the surface. Well, they can't tarmac it because, as has been pointed out up above, it's a bridleway, so I don't know how they're going to improve it. And it's interesting because once you've got a route like that, I wonder what happens when they find the sheer volume of traffic getting out of that site at the beginning and end of its chef, what they're going to do. The dimensions, of course, of this building are, as we've been told, 9,000 square metres. That's 100 metres long by 90 metres wide. 100 metres, you know how big 100 metres is because we've all watched the athletics on the television. That's an enormous shed going to go on a green site. There's no reference, of course, to the master plan, Raun's master plan. The NC funded a Raun's master plan, which again, when all the residents were consulted, I have the plan here if anybody really wants to see it, but all Warth Park stopped at Meadow Lane. It was never considered there was going to be developed south of Meadow Lane. The office spaces, I notice it very nicely says they will be provided as need requires. Well, why aren't they being provided right at the beginning? If 30% of this site, according to the appropriate planning regulations, has to be office space, or if we concede office space instead of small business space, which is not actually I don't agree with, but if we do concede that, why hasn't it been done at the beginning? This is mostly storage, let's face it. And we all know storage. We've had lots of these sites, and they're going to promise the earth about the number of people they employ. And Councillor Mercer pointed this out. They won't employ that number because it doesn't work like that. Now, we had an interesting, I think, discussion that I wasn't invited to with Mr. Oliver and the developers, and some of the councillors went to, and he recommended that they should advertise their plans more, and they did in Raun's Roundup. So I'm really kind of quoting what they say. This site is going to give permission, as we have heard, for 793 HG vehicles per day. Now, it's all very well saying there won't be that number, but who knows what's going to happen in the future? Who knows if one of those buildings is not occupied or is sublet or whatever? 793 HG vehicles. Now, supposing we assume that there are 600 workers there and 500 cars, that's 1,000 car movements per day. So through this underpass, which is not as wide as a bridge, we are told in the application, there are 1,800 potentially vehicles going to go through it. Now, if you work that out, if they did operate a 12-hour day, that would be 150 per hour. Come on, it's not possible they're going to do that. So the numbers don't actually stack up. I don't think either they're not going to be that number of employees, or some alternative route is going to have to be found to get those cars off site. 500 cars at one time. So, and I know where that alternative route will be, because they will say it's not viable to do that, and that's what developers say. It's not viable, and we will see vehicles be going down Meadow Lane. And remember, Meadow Lane can't be tarmacked because it's a bridleway. Now, this week is British Tourism Week. And I had a very nice one this morning at the annual conference of the Nene Valley Trust, which I have to say is very well led by Karen Williams from ENC. And this aims to celebrate the wildlife and ambience of the Nene Valley. And here we are, with an opportunity to preserve the future, while this application just simply wants to destroy it by putting 2 more sheds on it. On page 30 of the application, the Nene Valley Improvement Area has a number of comments which just ignored, just swept aside. Development does not conform to 116 of the NPPF, with an adverse effect on the SSSI, with which we spent so much effort and money getting that at Stannick Lakes and getting a triple SSI, and almost certainly, let's face it, the cranes are going to be up there, the dust is going to be up there, the noise, before we even start the actual buildings operating, and they are going to have a tremendous effect on the triple SSI, which, as we've heard, is only 200 metres away. How can we possibly say that won't affect it? Another aspect, EMC has just invested in its leisure policy, and us gentlemen who are more than 50 have been told that we must go walking. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to go walking down a tarmac road between two industrial sites, and nor do the people who use Meadow Lane every morning and every evening want to go down between two industrial sites, when they could be walking down a lane which would improve their health and well-being, looking over the fields, listening to the birds, and seeing in the distance Stannick Lakes. Now, I believe that among the other reasons for refusing this site, the one which comes to mind is the one which we used for Lyveden Beld, the wind farms there. Because they were exactly the same. They were going to destroy the outlook, or the technical word, I believe, is the setting. And this is what the inspector agreed, and the inspector who went along with the refusal by the councillors, against advice, the refusal by the councillors, and against the barristers who came along on the behalf of the developers, went against that. The inspector went against the developer, because he said it's going to destroy the countryside, it's going to destroy the setting. And there are, as I say, it's a pick and mix, this thing. So if you take the joint count strategy, if you look at policy 11, this says growth should be at a scale appropriate to the character and infrastructure of the town. If this development goes ahead, Warth Park will be bigger than the town. Actually, our site occupied will actually be bigger than Raunds. That can't be appropriate to the infrastructure and the development of the town. Policy 3, which I will just find for a moment, relates to the landscape. The landscape says, development should be located and designed in a way that's sensitive to landscape setting. It should conserve where possible, enhance the character and qualities of the local landscape, to make provision for retention and enhancement of features of landscape important. It should safeguard important views and vistas. Well, I don't think the lady who has the small holding at the bottom of Meadow Lane is going to have important view and vista enhanced somehow, including skylines. And we all know those wonderful diagrams we had with the original application for Wroxhill, which showed the sheds just above the skyline. You drive from Chelveston in the evening and they stand up, bright lights right against the skyline, completely destroying any night sky at all. They should protect the landscape setting and contribute to maintain the individual distinct character and separate identities. And the gentleman who spoke earlier talked about how we're creeping nearer and nearer to Stannick. And it's all very well saying that we're considering this application, not any other, but this just opens the doors for people to knock down a house on London Road, whether we get 5 metres round this development or not, and build all over that field, which will more or less join up Stannick to Raunds. And we may not be considering that application now, but that's the fact. If we approve this, we might as well give up, because what planning conditions or regulations can we find to stop someone doing that? And to say that there's a 5 metre bund around, well, look what they've done on Chelveston Road. They knocked down a house, made a road in. They could do exactly the same on London Road. I go on. Policy 20 says proposals should ensure the integrity of European designated sites, such as the Upper Noon Valley, by improving visual links between rivers and adjacent settlements. Well, you won't be seeing anything except a shed, will you? And provide sufficient infrastructure to mitigate highways impacts, including the impact of additional HGVs on site. Now, the sheer numbers of vehicles coming off this site. Remember we've said there's going to be at least 500 cars. There's going to be, could be, and I know we're going to say, oh, well, they're not going to do it, but they can do it. Once you give people permission to do something, they can do what they like. There could be all those HGVs coming onto the little roundabout and onto the A45. Along with the 350 houses that are being built off Brickyard Road, we will be using that route out in the morning. And I can assure you, having taken someone to a hospital appointment at 6 o'clock in the morning, I queued for 20 minutes to get onto the A45. It is an absolute blockage now. And of course the other Howden shed has conveniently been left empty, so we don't know how many more vehicles that's going to impose on the whole business. Policy 24 says approximately 30% of the floor space should be a mix of smaller units. Not so in this application. I don't think they're going to really seriously consider 30% of that floor space is going to be for other additions. Maybe it is so, maybe it doesn't. It's a shame though we're not having smaller units. It should be in a location which allows 24 operations with minimal environmental community effect. This will have a devastating effect on the people of Stanwick with having 24-hour operation. And it's all very well saying they're not going to do it all the time, but, who knows what the pressures are going to be, whether the market's going to pick up and everybody's going to a new kitchen, and the market's going to drop down and the second shed is going to be sublet. This development will destroy the landscape, the vistas from Warns and Stanwick, but also from Stanwick Lakes. Nobody's mentioned this, but from Stanwick Lakes there will now be a 120-foot building, because that's how high it is from where Stanwick Lakes is, which is only 80 foot above sea level. So a 120-foot high building will be clearly visible from Stanwick Lakes. Now I walk Stanwick Lakes very regularly, and I can see the buildings that are there now, but this is going to stand out even more, because it's all very well saying about the height of the building, but where it's positioned halfway up the hillside, that's what it's going to be. Now I think we councillors, and I'm not just talking about the councillors for Rawns, I'm talking all of us, have a responsibility as custodians of the countryside for the whole district we represent. And we care about our towns in East Northamptonshire, and the people of Rawns have certainly shown they care. And although I know it is not a planning in the NPPF, we are supposed to take notice of local people. Roxon, I think, made much attempt really to consult local people, came along at a couple of town council meetings, that was it. The town council has taken a lot of care to consult the local people. And all the time the local people have said no, no, no. They said no through the neighbourhood plan. Now ENC, first of all, as we've heard this evening, actually didn't object to a neighbourhood plan. It's only when Roxhill came along that suddenly, oh well, I don't think you'll get that through. So, the people of Rawns have said we do not want this development because it's going to destroy the setting, destroy the landscape. Now I know we'll hear someone say, well it's going to go to appeal, because every time we have these things it goes to appeal. It's going to cost £150,000 to go to appeal. That's £3 per person in East Northamptonshire, or £15 per person in Rawns. I think the people of Rawns will willingly spend £15 of their council tax on an appeal if that's the way it is. I think they would, because they feel much more strongly. They're not worried about whether we have a tourism officer to guide people around the sheds. They're not really worried about whether we have a leisure policy, because they want to go for a walk down Meadow Lane. They want to have their open countryside, the only bit of open countryside that is left round Rawns, because all the rest is surrounded by buildings, either sheds or houses. The only bit is left round Rawns is this last bit of land. So, I feel very strongly about this. I feel strongly that we as councillors represent the people. The officers represent the people because they get paid by them. We represent the people because we get voted by them. And if we don't get voted by, there's no point in sitting here if we don't follow as much as we can within the regulations what we want. So I want, please, a recorded vote for this application by name, so that the people in the other rooms can hear who's called out, because I feel that we need to show that we as councillors support democracy, we support the people who elected us, and this is a real opportunity for us to show that. I've highlighted some reasons for refusing this application. I think setting is a primary one, but there may well be others. Councillor Rothan's maybe highlighted some. We should not approve this application. We should not allow this to spoil this area forever, because what we're doing, deciding, is concreting over our children and our grandchildren's heritage. because they will want to walk to Stannick Lakes, not through an industrial park. And I think this is an opportunity to stop that. Thank you.
We're already paying £3 for the previous application that we lost on appeal in Raunds. Councillor Swanston.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, we've heard about the Raunds neighbourhood plan this evening. It's still being progressed, but it's not through the complete process and examination. And I would say, even when the neighbourhood plan has gone through referendum and adoption, it still does not take precedence and has to be considered in tandem with the NPPF and the core strategy. I know this because this has happened in my town, High Ferrers. We also have King's Chamber's advice, and it says that legal advice that no significant weight should be given to the neighbourhood plan at this stage. In the officer's report, it says there are no objections from the Environment Agency, East Northamptonshire Planning Policy Committee, Flood Authority, Natural England, and the Council's Senior Environment Protection Officer. On the positive side too, I think we shouldn't forget that employment is going to be created in the Raunds area. Okay, there's dispute about some of the number of jobs, but we do have the offer of around 500 jobs, and I don't think this is something to be sneezed at. Jobs are just as important as houses when we have planning applications in front of us. I do not feel we have sufficient grounds to refuse this application, and I'm not convinced that we should go against the officer advice this evening.
Thank you. Just a moment, Lance. I think Councillor Mercer was next.
Thank you, Chair.
Then you, Lance.
I've got a feeling that Councillor Hughes may have been issued with an out-of-date copy of the JCS, because during the public examination several words were changed in it. One of the quotes he made is from an earlier version. It says in policy 24E, for instance, that development should be in locations which allow 24-hour operations with acceptable environmental, community and landscape impact, not minimal. And that is a really, really critical difference that the inspector imposed upon us, because the wording that the Joint Planning Committee proposed was minimal, as Councillor Hughes said, but it got overruled by the inspector. And the difference between minimal and acceptable is huge. So we need to be measuring this against what can be acceptable, and that doesn't just mean that there's one person who's disadvantaged, which often there is. It means that the community overall has a significant disadvantage compared with the advantages of the development. It's a pity that the inspector did not agree with us there, but we have to go with what was approved, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Could the officer say whether he agrees that the building adds quality and aesthetic to the rolling landscape of this ancient river valley, where skylarks soar, deer, badgers, foxes and stoats roam?
I think the design of the building reflects the quality of the existing Howdens building and the other buildings on Warth Park. You wouldn't say that it adds to the landscape character.
Then would you say it took away?
In this location, no.
Councillor, sorry, you finished. Councillor Jones.
I have for the moment, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mercer.
Thank you. I didn't know the site, but I went on the site visit. I'm very glad I did, because it gives you a much better perspective. One of the things that I've heard quite a lot of complaints of is the existing building standing out like a bright light at night. And one of the things that's very striking about it is the white band at the top. It doesn't come over just reading in the papers. But perhaps the officer could come back in a minute. But as I understand it, the new building, they've said that they might do, grey instead of white at the top. It's also was pointed out to us that it was more or less half the height of the existing building. The thing that I thought would be most a problem with this site was the view from Stanwick, because Stanwick's quite high on the hill. You don't realise that, and you've got quite a view across the valley. We were looking at the sort of mitigation and what the perspective was. And although there was a problem with having a big shed there, I think the existing one is probably more of a problem than the new one, albeit it'll be closer, because it is higher and it's got this white cladding at the top, whatever they call it. I've heard quite a bit about the traffic and I've some conflicting views. One of the speakers said, and I think one of the councillors, about the traffic going down Meadow Lane. Now, as I understand it, there will be no traffic down Meadow Lane. It's a path, it's a bridleway. There were quite a lot of people walking down it when we were there. The traffic will be all through this underpass. It was mentioned, I think by Councillor Hughes, about the number of cars, and I take his point about that with that underpass, and I'd just like to perhaps, if we could find the width of that underpass and whether it's going to cope with that level of traffic. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned at all by anybody, but I've seen it in some of the objections and the problems, is the wind speeds, and it has been mentioned about the speeds of the wind and the fact of the funnelling, and I don't think we've really heard much in the officer report about that, so perhaps the officer could help with that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just on the landscape, I will go back to the landscape consultant's conclusion, where he says the planning application will give rise to adverse landscape and visual effects and will as a consequence bring about a substantial landscape and visual change to the application site and the immediate locality. He goes on to say the extent and nature of those adverse effects in the context of the location of the site adjacent to the development at Warth Park Phase 2 and the proposed mitigation measures are not, however, of such overall significance that they should weigh unduly in the planning balance. So I just wanted to go back to that. Councillor Mercer, you mentioned the white banding at the top of the building. That is what is proposed. However, when you view the proposed building from Stanwick, it will be set against the existing Howden's building. So that you could argue that white band won't serve any purpose because it won't be read against the skyline. So there is a condition recommended in on the report that further details are submitted for approval in terms of the material treatment of the building. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a white band, it can be a different colour.
Yeah.
So you're saying there is room for manoeuvre, perhaps, of making it more blend in more?
Yes, it's submitted as a white band, but there is room for manoeuvre, and that's been confirmed by Howden's.
Okay.
The width of the underpass and things like that.
And the other question you raised was Meadow Lane, wasn't it?
The underpass and the ability of it to take all the traffic.
Oh, okay, so the width of the underpass is... Well, the height is 10 metres. It's 10.5 in width.
So can you just explain in terms of like vehicles and that?
Yeah. So the section drawing that we have shows two HGVs passing side by side along the access under Meadow Lane.
So it's wide enough for two HGVs to pass
Two HGVs,
underneath the bridge?
10.5 metres with a 3 metre footway either side. Sorry, 3 metre footway on one side, 2 metre on the other.
So the wind speeds and the tunnelling.
I haven't got that information, unfortunately, about the impact on the noise.
No, it wasn't the noise. It was somebody said that there'd been a lot of damage to some of the buildings with very high wind speeds.
It's the funnel
Again, I haven't got
down
any
the
confirmation of that. I couldn't categorically say there has or hasn't been.
Councillor Jenny.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a relatively minor point, may or may not be minor. It was the point Councillor Mercer raised on maintenance of the landscaping area. I went on a site visit on Sunday. I wasn't aware that there was going to be an official one held early in the week. I don't think Councillor Mercer got an answer to the question on the maintenance of this area. It did appear to me, I didn't know the site specifically other than driving past it on the A45, but I did find a small car park, and the area that is existing is equipped with benches, dog bins. So it seemed to me that it was intended to be public open space. But is there a condition, or how is it going to be managed?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's no condition. It will be controlled by the legal agreement. It will be maintenance in perpetuity. Yeah, we didn't come back on Councillor Mercer's question. It's maintenance in perpetuity. It's managed by Roxhill at the moment. There will be a provision in the 106 to say that in the future it could be transferred to a management company, but it will still be in perpetuity. And there will be the public access clause in there as well. We had discussion at previous committees about public access in perpetuity, and it will be the same for this legal agreement.
Okay. Are we about there? Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarity, really. One of the speakers, June Longhurst, raised the point that Meadow Lane was gifted to the Town Council many moons ago. And it was a question I asked on the site visit, and I haven't had a response yet. But who actually owns Meadow Lane, please?
Bear with me, I do have that information. It's owned by 2 private landowners.
But it's a designated bridleway.
It's a designated bridleway.
So you can categorically confirm it wasn't gifted to Ronstown.
Wasn't gifted to the Town Council. That's the information I have here.
Okay, thank you.
Town Council may have sold it.
No, I don't think so. Another point I'd like to raise is that the Town Council did do consultations with the residents of Raunds. They did 2 actually, not 1, as was stated. There was one done as part of the neighbourhood plan, but there also was a separate one done at the public meeting. So on both of those, one was 94% against and one was 97% against, so that it was significantly more than was actually outlined in the report. I know because I was at both of them, so I just wanted to highlight that not only were there those 2 consultations, but there was the petition, and there is also and that has gone to the Secretaries to Parliament.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clitheroe.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll be pleased to hear I shall keep this brief, and I don't think there's much needs answering. A point was made, I think it was by Councillor Lewis, about the office space. If you look to top of page 2 of the update sheet, the intention is to build a substantial amount, if not all of the office space permitted at the outset. Well, that seems to me fairly clear. I've got great sympathy for the people of Raunds and Stanwick over this planning application, the same as I have, for instance, with those horrible sheds at Thrapston, but unfortunately they are part of today's life. It's not good, 24-hour working, big sheds, light pollution, noise. But I don't find any of them, with the answers we've got, sufficient to refuse this application. And unlike, again, as somebody said, they're not bothered about a previous appeal and costs that cost us £150,000. I am concerned about that sort of thing, and particularly that were we to go down that route, the fact we would lose all control of it. I think the high acoustic fence is going to be good, something the applicant needn't have done, but has offered to do. And one thing that I would agree, and if he agrees, I would second the fact of a recorded vote, but for an entirely different reason, so that we have a record that should this go to appeal, we know which councillors pushed us that way.
Okay,
thank you, Chairman.
I wanted to close it there because we're getting towards the 9 o'clock time, but just quick comments from Mr. Underwood. Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman.
Then
I will just make the point that applications and granting are given to approximately 1,100 houses. Where are the people in those houses going to go for jobs? This certainly offers an opportunity, whether the figures that we've given are right or wrong, but there's considerable expansion in Raunds through residential properties, and where will they go? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Thanks very much, Chair. From the report and the answers provided, it appears to me that the application achieves the development goal of the NPPF, but spectacularly fails on sustainable. 1 million square feet of warehousing space is out of keeping with this area. It destroys visual amenity, an objective of the NPPF. It creates a noisy neighbourhood. It deteriorates air quality. It will operate 24/7, and it will be lit. In design, it fails to meet the quality and aesthetic expectation. It's just a shed. It fails the test to make a place better for people, an expectation of the NPPF. With respect to the joint core strategy, it fails outcome 5. This is just warehousing, not mixed development. The report recognises that it does not meet policies 3, 4, 11, 20 and arguably 24. My concern is that had applicants been well advised, they could have found a site 3/4 of a mile away that would allow them to meet the social and environmental as well as the economic objectives of the NPPF, but they were not advised to do so, and I ask, not expecting a reply, by whom? I would be prepared to work with the applicants to find a site in Raunds that satisfies the NPPF and JCS, because this application does not. From the information in front of me, we have an application that diminishes the environment, does nothing to enhance society, but provides economic gain for Wroxhill and the landowner. It is not clear to me that more economic value is created in Northamptonshire, just simply transferred. For me, the application does not meet the expectation of the NPPF nor the JCS, and for those reasons would urge my colleagues to reject the recommendation to grant.
Thank you. Councillor Mercer. Last one.
Thank you. A couple of mentions have been made about appeals, and I just wondered if our legal expert sitting there could advise if this were turned down, if it went to appeal, what are your thoughts on costs? Sorry for putting you in the deep end.
Well, it's something we've discussed beforehand.
Well, thank you, Chair. What I would say about this, if it does go to appeal, there are a lot of issues involved. There's the noise issue, there's the visual aspects, there will be the Section 106 agreement, which means a lot of experts on either side debating against each other. And somebody mentioned earlier on about experts disagreeing. Once that gets to appeal,
it will take a long time. I would think this appeal would be, definitely would be more than a week. It would be one where there will be a lot of debate, and in that sense, in taking that into account, costs could well be in the region of 150,000. If the council loses, of course, it will have to pay its own costs plus the other side's costs, because the inspector might consider it unreasonable for the council to have refused this application. So we're talking as a minimum of 150,000, and probably that's a very conservative estimate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've answered the question. So before we go on, we have to officially close at 9, but is it your wish, and can I have a movement, a proposal for extending the meeting? Those in favour? Okay. Those against? That's carried. So we'll extend beyond 9 o'clock. Before we go to the vote, which has been asked to be recorded, Head of Planning Services would like to make a few comments.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been a healthy debate tonight, so thank you to the councillors for that. What I would say is that the officer recommendation before you has been come to after a lot of detailed thought. Your officers across the council who have been involved have not undertaken this task lightly. Indeed, we have employed specialist advisors to give us the information that we require when we've been challenging elements of the application. That includes on visual impact, on noise, and on the legal elements around the neighbourhood plan. That's all been before you tonight, and you have discussed that in some detail. But I just want to reiterate that as far as your officers are concerned, this application, on balance, is able to be approved, and it's our recommendation that it should be approved with the conditions, with the additional condition that is in the update report and subject to a Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. I did say no more, but go on.
It's just one quick one. It's with regards to Section 106 actually. I didn't think there was anything in there for community infrastructure should the application be approved. There's nothing there for the town. So that's what I wanted to make sure, that there was something in there for at least for the town. Thank you.
Everyone's looking at everyone else.
Any community facility contributions do have to be fairly related to the development. The applicant has proposed the additions to Meadow Lane, the additional country park, the landscaping, and I don't think there's anything over and above that that could be fairly related to the development.
Well, when they came to do the presentation at the council and when they did the public consultation, they said that they would give money to improve Amos Lawrence Field or put some form of BMX track or something. So that was told. It wasn't approved by the town council. It never came to the town council, but they did say that they would do something for the town.
With Section 106 agreements, as you probably all know, there are very strict tests as to what contributions and what obligations are imposed on the developer, and you have to work within those tests. And there's all sorts of things that any community would like, obviously, and have a shopping list for it. But what we're looking at in terms of Section 106 is what is proposed by the developer within those tests, and we can only judge it by those tests. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So, Councillor Watson, can we have a proposal, please?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to colleagues who've, I don't say helped me, because part of me thinks I don't like this development, and a lot of what has been said I have a great deal of sympathy with. However, we have to be here as councillors and be objective about an application. We've had no help if we wanted to go against this application. We've had no help from highways, from Natural England, from the CIS, county archaeologists, Uncle Tom Coblin, All Environment Agency, Flood, and so on and so forth. And as I said in my introduction, my personal views, well, they don't count for this, unfortunately. We have to have strong planning reasons for turning this down. And listening to the debate tonight, I'm not convinced I've heard reasons strong enough to support a refusal. We've heard, okay, maybe it's going to cost us 150k on appeal. Well, okay, so be it. It's been mentioned, okay, Rawns wouldn't mind paying £15 per house. Well, I don't know, I've not done any survey on that, but even if they were, unfortunately, we'd fork out the 15 quid and still lose control. It would be money down the drain as far as I'm concerned. So unless anybody can come up with a strong reason for refusal or reasons, I'm inclined to go with the officer recommendation. I would ask one thing of the officers, maybe a tiny thing, I don't know. We talk about a noise barrier fence, 3 metre high. I notice on the existing building the fence there is actually 4 metres high. I didn't put a tape measure on it, but I was assured by the head of the planning that it comes in 2 metre chunks, and there were 2 of them, so that makes 4. I don't know whether we can condition this or whether we could go back to the developer and say, is that possible? It might in some way alleviate or help to alleviate additional noise problem, but I think regrettably I have to say I go with the officer's recommendation. Yeah.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Chairman. With great reluctance, I have to concur with Councillor Watham. I looked at this very hard. As you probably see, I went through the core spatial strategy and I checked the absolute latest version of it, checked all the wording, and I could not see a get out of jail card within it. I could not see anything in the MPPF we could use, so reluctantly I have to second the proposal we grant against my desires.
We'll get your names read out.
Okay, Chairman. Councillor Clitheroe.
For.
Councillor Harrison.
Against.
Councillor Hilson.
Against.
Councillor Howell.
Against.
Councillor Hughes.
Against.
Councillor Jenny.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Andy Mercer.
For.
Councillor Jill Mercer.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Saunston.
For.
Councillor Shacklock.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Underwood.
For.
Councillor Wathen.
For.
Councillor Whiting.
For.
Councillor Stern.
For.
Thank you, Chairman. That was 11 votes for and 6 against, so the motion's carried.
I'm surprised. Sorry?
Surprised that went through like that.
Well, who knows?
Sorry. I didn't realise you weren't standing there.